Welcome back to Relaxing Stories for Sleep. Tonight, we go far back into the ancient world of gods and mortals, war and honor to retell Homer's Iliad, one of the greatest literary works for all times. The Iliad remains one of humanity's most enduring epics and is considered to be one of the first hallmarks of Western literature. What follows is a narrative summary of the Iliad, faithful to Homer's story. The tale begins not at the war's start, but in its 9th year, where pride and rage ignite events that shape heroes and nations. Close your eyes, relax, and sleep well. Book 1. The Quarrel and the Wrath begins. Sing, muse, of the rage of Achilles, son of Peleus, destructive and divine. Yet our tale does not open in bloodshed, but in a quarrel. The war had dragged on for nearly 10 years around the great city of Troy, whose tall walls gleamed in the sun like the ribs of some colossal beast. The Achaean army had pitched its sprawling camp by the sea. Smoke rose from their cooking fires, and the salt air stung their eyes as they looked toward the land that had swallowed so much of their blood. These warriors had crossed the sea for Helen, that fateful queen whose beauty had drawn princes and kings into an oath-bound alliance. But after nearly a decade, their ships had grown weathered, their armor dented, and their tempers sharp as blades. It is here the story truly begins, not at the war's start, but in its bitter middle, with a quarrel among the Achaeans themselves. For Homer's tale is not about the fall of Troy alone, but about the wrath of one man, Achilles, and the ruin that wrath would bring upon his comrades. The spark came not from Troy's spears, but from Apollo's anger. Chryses, a Trojan priest of the god, had come humbly to the Achaean camp to ransom back his daughter, whom Agamemnon, the high king of the Greeks, had taken as a war prize. Chryses offered ransom and prayers, but Agamemnon, swollen with pride, spurned him. He mocked the old man, threatened him, and sent him away in disgrace. To dishonor a priest was to dishonor his god, and Apollo, the far-shooting, heard the insult. Soon arrows of plague fell upon the Greek camp. Soldiers sickened, fires burned with unholy smoke, and corpses lay unburied on the shore. The army knew they suffered because their leader had enraged a god. At last, under pressure from his men, Agamemnon relented and returned the girl to her father. But in doing so, he felt humiliated before the host. His kingship was supposed to mean authority, prestige, and obedience. To give up his prize under compulsion was shameful, and so Agamemnon lashed out. He declared before all the assembled chieftains that he would seize another prize from among them, to prove that none dared stand above him. His threat was not merely about property. In the warrior's code, a war prize symbolized honor itself. To be stripped of it was to be shamed. Achilles, greatest of the Achaeans in battle, could not bear the insult. His temper, always near to boiling, erupted. He stood, his eyes blazing, and declared that Agamemnon was no true leader but a tyrant who devoured his own people's strength. The quarrel turned so fierce that Achilles nearly drew his sword against the High King, an act that would have split the Greek alliance apart. Only the goddess Athena, descending unseen, restrained him, whispering calm into his ear. Still, though Achilles sheathed his blade, his fury smoldered. Agamemnon, determined to assert his authority, struck a fateful blow. He seized Achilles' prize of honor, the maiden Briseis, and took her for himself. To the modern ear this may sound like mere possession, but in the heroic world of the Greeks it was a symbolic castration of Achilles' honor. Without his prize, Achilles was shamed before all, and shame, to these warriors, was worse than death. In a rage that would change the fate of nations, Achilles withdrew from battle. He stalked back to his tent, his heart storming. He declared that he would no longer fight for the Achaeans. Let them bleed, let them burn, let them beg for his aid. He would not come. But his wrath did not end there. By the dark shore of the sea, Achilles lifted his arms and cried out to his mother, Thetis, a goddess of the deep. She rose, shimmering like moonlight on the waves, and listened to her son's grief. Achilles begged her to intercede with Zeus, the king of the gods, to tilt the scales of war in Troy's favor. If the Achaeans suffered crushing losses, then Agamemnon and all the host would see what ruin they had wrought by dishonoring him. Thetis, sorrowful, promised she would go to Olympus and plead with Zeus himself, and thus the stage was set. Achilles' wrath had withdrawn the greatest warrior from the field. The Greeks, stripped of their champion, would face the Trojans alone, and in their suffering, the epic of the Iliad would unfold. The morning after Achilles withdrew, the Achaean camp was restless. A pall of fear hung over the soldiers, their hearts heavy with the absence of their greatest warrior. Yet the leaders gathered, determined to maintain morale. Agamemnon, still smarting from the quarrel, summoned a council, and Zeus, high above Olympus, contemplated the mortal struggle, watching as human anger and divine will intertwined. Before the council could convene, Zeus sent a dream to Agamemnon, a vision that promised victory if he struck quickly against Troy. Mistaking the dream for a favorable omen, Agamemnon called the troops to arms. Yet even as the soldiers lined up, their ranks trembled with uncertainty, for the knowledge of Achilles' wrath had spread like a contagion. The Greeks knew that without him, the battles to come would be more perilous than ever. In Book 2, Homer unfolds a grand catalogue: the men, their ships, and the leaders of every contingent. This catalogue of ships is not mere list-making. It is an homage to the multiplicity of the Greek world, the patchwork of city-states bound together by oath, ambition, and the lure of glory. Here, one sees the cultural fabric of the Mycenaean Greeks, proud warriors, each with a lineage, a homeland, and a code that defined them. Once the ranks were formed, the Achaeans marched to the plains of Troy. On the opposite side, the Trojans, too, rallied under King Priam's sons, Hector among them, a prince of courage and responsibility. The young warriors' hearts burned with honor, the weight of family and city upon them. For in this world, a man's glory was inseparable from his loyalty and bravery. The first clashes were fierce and chaotic. Spears flew like hail, and the clash of bronze rang like thunder across the plain. Homer lingers on individual combats, highlighting both the skill and the fear of mortals caught in the machinery of war. Among these, the gods subtly intervene. Athena inspires the Greeks to strike with precision. Apollo deflects arrows to protect the Trojans. The divine presence is constant, a reminder that in the heroic world view, mortals are never fully masters of their fate. By the end of Book 2, the tension grows. The Greeks, though numerous, are weakened by internal discord and the absence of Achilles. The Trojans, emboldened by divine favor, press forward. Here, Homer interweaves commentary. The human heart, though valiant, is vulnerable to pride, envy, and the whims of the gods. The stage is set for further tragedy, for the hero who withdraws from battle will ultimately shape the course of destiny through absence and wrath. Book 3 shifts the focus to a moment of dramatic tension. Paris, the Prince of Troy, steps forward to challenge a Greek champion. This duel is not merely about combat, it is a ritualized test of honor. Men of both sides pause, understanding that glory in single combat can elevate a man's reputation and, in a society bound by honor, even affect the morale of armies. Helen, watching from Troy's high walls, observes the duel with anguish and longing, the human cost of desire evident in her gaze. Paris' fight is brief and inconclusive, revealing the disparity between appearance and true valor. While handsome and favored in the eyes of some, Paris is no warrior in the mold of Hector or Achilles. Yet his actions ignite the passions of men and gods alike, for in Homer's world, even minor acts reverberate across fate and history. Book 4 expands the narrative into larger battle sequences, illustrating the ebb and flow of war. The gods, now openly interfering, sway events. Athena incites Menelaus to action, while Apollo shields Hector at critical moments. Homer's description of combat is rich with sensory detail, the ringing of bronze, the cries of the wounded, the smell of blood and dust, bringing the battlefield alive. Cultural context is clear. Courage is praised, cowardice despised, and every man's honor is on display, observed by both his peers and the immortal watchers above. By the close of Book 4, the war intensifies. Skirmishes turn into pitched battles, strategies shift with each divine intervention, and the fragility of human life is starkly revealed. Though Achilles still remains in his tent, his looming absence casts a shadow over the Greeks' efforts. Here, Homer reminds the audience that the epic is as much about human psychology, rage, grief, pride, as it is about war. The sun rose over the plains of Troy, casting a golden light on warriors already weary from days of battle. Book V opens with Diomedes, a young but formidable Greek warrior, stepping into the fray with courage and cunning. Known for his skill and favored by Athena, he cuts a path through the Trojan ranks, demonstrating not just brute strength, but the careful calculation that distinguishes a seasoned fighter. Homer lingers on the psychology of combat here. Fear, pride, and the longing for Kleos, the glory that outlives death, drive each man's movements as much as muscle or steel. The gods, never idle, intervene directly. Athena shields Diomedes and even allows him to wound a god, Ares, an act almost unimaginable in the mortal world. This moment illustrates the porous boundary between human and divine in Homer's universe. Mortals act boldly, yet the immortals manipulate outcomes, rewarding, punishing, or merely observing as the drama unfolds. Meanwhile, Hector, the Trojan prince and paragon of duty and valor, emerges as a counterbalance to the Greek heroism. He is deeply aware of the weight of expectation. His city, his family, and the honor of Troy rest on his shoulders. Yet he is also human, capable of fear and doubt. In these books, Homer portrays him not merely as a warrior, but as a man caught between love, duty, and the inexorable demands of war. His duels with Diomedes and others highlight the tension between personal valor and the collective fate of a people. Book 6 shifts focus to the intimate and tragic dimensions of the conflict. Hector returns to Troy briefly, and we see him in a tender moment with his wife, Andromache, and his infant son, Astyanax. The contrast between domestic warmth and the brutal battlefield outside Troy's walls is striking. Andromache pleads with Hector to retreat, warning that his death would leave them destitute and unprotected. Hector listens, torn between love for his family and the inexorable pull of duty and honor. Homer uses these passages to comment on the human cost of war, showing that heroism comes at the expense of personal happiness and human connection. Book 7 presents a pivotal duel between Hector and Ajax, one of the mightiest Greek warriors after Achilles. This formal duel, governed by ritual and overseen by the armies, exemplifies the heroic code. Combat is not only about killing but also about honor, fairness, and reputation. Each fighter respects the other's skill, and the battle ends inconclusively, demonstrating that in Homer's world, the outcomes of individual contests are never guaranteed. The gods remain present, subtly influencing the course without wholly dominating it, underscoring the interplay of fate and human agency. Book 8 shifts the narrative back to large-scale warfare. Zeus, watching from Olympus, decrees that the Trojans will have the upper hand for the day, showing once again the role of divine will in shaping human events. The Greek forces are driven back, suffering heavy losses. Homer emphasizes the fragility of human endeavor when divine favor tilts the scales. Through vivid descriptions, the clash of bronze, the cries of wounded soldiers, the fire of burning ships, the reader experiences the chaos and horror of battle firsthand. Themes of mortality, honor, and the fleeting nature of glory resonate throughout these passages. At the close of Book 8, the stakes are high. Troy presses its advantage, and the Greeks face despair without their greatest champion. The tension builds toward the inevitability of Achilles' wrath altering the course of the war. Homer's commentary throughout these books reminds the audience that war is as much about human emotion, pride, fear, grief, as it is about martial skill. Every decision, every act of courage or hesitation, reverberates across the battlefield and in the hearts of those involved. The Greek army, battered and demoralized, gathered under the leadership of Agamemnon. In Book 9, desperation drives the Achaeans to a crucial council. They must persuade Achilles to return to the fight. The king sends envoys, Odysseus, Ajax, and Phoenix, to Achilles' tent, bearing gifts and entreaties, hoping to heal the rupture caused by his anger. Achilles, however, remains unyielding. His wrath, rooted in honor and pride, burns hotter than any battlefield fire. He refuses the treasures offered, explaining that no mortal gift can restore the humiliation he suffered at Agamemnon's hands. Here Homer gives readers insight into the heroic code. A man's honor is inseparable from his public reputation. To regain material possessions is insufficient if one's status and pride remain wounded. The Achaean envoys depart, hearts heavy, knowing that without Achilles, the Greeks' chances of victory dwindle. Book X shifts the narrative to a quieter, more clandestine setting. A night raid. Diomedes and Odysseus slip past the Trojan lines under darkness, seeking to gather intelligence and strike at key targets. The suspense and tension are palpable. Stealth, strategy, and courage are as crucial as brute strength. The raid succeeds, demonstrating the value of cunning alongside valor in Homeric warfare. The reader is reminded that war is not only fought in open fields, but also in shadowed corners where wit and bravery determine life or death. By Book 11, the Greek army is again thrown into chaos. Agamemnon, Diomedes, and other leaders are wounded in battle, forcing new heroes to rise. Homer emphasizes the ebb and flow of fortune in war. No warrior, however mighty, is invincible. The Trojans gain the upper hand, and the Greeks are pressed back toward their ships. Zeus watches from Olympus, subtly influencing the battle's outcome, a constant reminder that human endeavor exists within the bounds of divine will and fate. In Book 12, the Trojans, emboldened, assault the Greek fortifications. Hector leads the charge, a figure of relentless determination and martial skill. The narrative focuses on the intensity of the siege. Walls are scaled, gates assaulted, and the clangor of battle resounds. Homer's rich descriptions capture the chaos of the fighting while simultaneously highlighting individual heroism, from the daring of a single warrior to the collective effort of a unit. Cultural norms of honor, valor, and duty dictate the choices of every fighter, and Homer intersperses commentary on the fleeting nature of life and the enduring desire for glory. These books underscore the growing tension that will culminate in the death of Patroclus and the return of Achilles to battle. The narrative weaves together human emotion, heroic code, and divine intervention, showing that the fates of individuals and armies alike are intertwined with both personal choices and forces beyond mortal control. The reader witnesses not only the tactics and bloodshed of war, but also the profound ethical and emotional dilemmas faced by heroes bound by honor, loyalty, and pride. As dawn broke over the bloodied plains, the Greek army struggled to hold the line against the relentless Trojan advance. In Book 13, Poseidon, the sea god, moved quietly among the Greeks, inspiring them to rally. The soldiers' morale, fragile after repeated setbacks, was rekindled by divine encouragement. Homer emphasizes that in this world, the gods' interventions are both subtle and dramatic. They reflect human anxieties and amplify the stakes, yet humans must still act with courage and cunning. The battle surged with fury, warriors clashed, shields splintered, and spears were hurled with deadly precision. Even in the midst of chaos, Homer lingers on moments of individual valor, a single soldier saving a comrade, a hero facing impossible odds, a young fighter tasting the bittersweet mix of fear and exhilaration. The ebb and flow of battle is not only physical but moral. Courage inspires comrades, while hesitation can lead to disaster. In Book 14, the narrative shifts to a clever and almost theatrical moment. Hera, queen of the gods, schemes to distract Zeus so that the Greeks may gain an advantage. She enlists Aphrodite and Athena, employing seduction, deception, and divine influence to tilt events. This book illuminates Greek cultural values. Cunning, cleverness, and strategy are as important as strength. The gods themselves model human traits, exaggerating virtues and flaws to shape the mortal world. Book 15 sees the consequences of Zeus' renewed attention. The Trojans regain the upper hand as the king of the gods favors them. The Greeks are pressed back toward their ships, illustrating the precariousness of human fortune under divine influence. Yet even in retreat, individual acts of heroism shine. Homer provides rich detail of the warrior's physical and emotional struggles, exhaustion, fear, determination, and the desperate hope that honor might be preserved even in defeat. By Book 16, the narrative reaches a pivotal turning point. Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion, steps forward with a heavy heart. Though he is not the epic's central hero, his courage and sense of duty compel him to act. Donning Achilles' armor, he leads the Myrmidons into battle, rallying the Greek troops and striking fear into the Trojan ranks. Homer highlights the tension between personal bravery and fate. Patroclus is aware that he cannot be invincible, yet he fights for the sake of his friends and his honor. Patroclus' exploits are magnificent. He slays many Trojans, driving them back toward the walls of Troy. Yet the shadow of destiny looms. Apollo strikes him down, and Hector delivers the fatal blow. The death of Patroclus is not merely a plot point, it is a seismic shift in the narrative. His loss catalyzes Achilles' return to battle, illustrating Homer's central theme: wrath, grief, and honor are forces that shape not only individuals but entire armies. Through these books, Homer intertwines human psychology, martial culture, and divine interaction. The battlefield is not just a place of physical contest, it is a crucible where courage, loyalty, and pride are tested, and where the presence of gods amplifies the stakes. Patroclus' death serves as both emotional climax and narrative pivot, setting in motion the inexorable return of Achilles and the tragic consequences that follow. The battlefield roared with chaos after Patroclus' fall. In Book 17, the Myrmidons, still clothed in the armor of Achilles, fought desperately to recover the body of their fallen comrade. The struggle over Patroclus' corpse became a scene of monumental tension, for in Homeric culture, a warrior's honor and legacy were inseparable from the treatment of his body. To let it fall into enemy hands was to risk eternal shame, not only for the deceased, but also for the living companions who bore responsibility for him. Hector, triumphant and yet wary, pressed the attack, dragging Patroclus' armor through the dust-strewn battlefield. Around him, the clash of spears and shields reflected both mortal skill and divine will. Apollo continued to guide and shield Hector, emphasizing the interplay between fate and human action. Despite the chaos, Homer captures moments of strategy, courage, and hesitation, underscoring that war is as much about the decisions of individuals as it is about numbers or force. In Book 18, grief and fury intertwine. Achilles learns of Patroclus' death and is consumed by unrelenting rage. Homer portrays his sorrow with striking intensity. The greatest warrior of the Achaeans, whose pride once kept him from battle, now burns with vengeance. His mother, the sea goddess Thetis, comforts him and provides divine assistance, commissioning new armor forged by Hephaestus. This episode highlights both the human emotion of grief and the importance of ritual and symbolism in Greek culture. Armor is not merely protective gear, but a manifestation of identity, honor, and divine favor. The narrative tension escalates in Book 19, as Achilles reconciles with Agamemnon and formally returns to battle. Here, Homer emphasizes the restoration of social and martial order. The heroic code demands that personal grievance yield to duty in times of collective crisis. Achilles' anger, once destructive, is now redirected into righteous fury against the Trojans. His re-entry transforms the war's dynamics. His presence alone inspires the Greeks and strikes terror into their enemies. Book 20 plunges into relentless combat. Achilles, now fully armed, cuts through the Trojan ranks like a force of nature. Homer meticulously describes the fury of battle. Each encounter is imbued with psychological insight, capturing fear, courage, and the complex interplay of honor and mortality. The gods, particularly Athena, Ares, and Apollo, intervene freely, shaping outcomes and magnifying human emotions. In this world, heroic action is inseparable from divine context. Mortals strive, yet the gods amplify, obstruct, and observe. Amid the carnage, Achilles confronts Hector. The tension is immense, not merely two warriors fighting, but a symbolic clash of principles, honor, and destiny. Every strike carries weight. Every choice resonates with both personal and societal significance. Homer pauses to highlight Hector's humanity, his love for Troy, his sense of duty, his fear of leaving a legacy undone. The audience witnesses a tragic inevitability, the culmination of wrath, pride, and fate converging in one monumental confrontation. By the close of Book 20, the stage is set for the decisive duel that will seal Hector's fate and bring Achilles' vengeance fully into play. These books emphasize the moral and cultural universe of the Iliad. Honor, grief, and the interplay of human and divine forces define every action, and the consequences of wrath and courage reverberate far beyond the individual. The river Scamander ran red with blood as Book 21 opens. Achilles, now fully consumed by his wrath, drives the Trojans before him with unstoppable fury. Homer paints the scene with epic grandeur, the clashing of bronze, the cries of the dying, and the terror in the hearts of men. Even the river itself seems to rebel, swelling with the dead and attempting to halt the unstoppable force of Achilles' rage. Here, nature itself becomes a participant in the story, emphasizing the cosmic scale of heroism, anger, and divine influence in Homer's vision. The gods continue to intervene openly. Athena restrains certain Trojans, Apollo shields others, and Poseidon watches the battlefield with interest. Homer uses these interventions not merely as spectacle, but to illustrate the interplay between fate and free will. Human courage is vital, yet the outcome of events is always tethered to forces beyond mortal control. The battlefield becomes a theater of mortal and divine power, reflecting the values of courage, honor, and reputation that define the heroic code. In Book 22, the climactic confrontation between Achilles and Hector takes place before the walls of Troy. Homer pauses the chaos of battle to focus entirely on the duel, which is both intensely personal and symbolically monumental. Hector, aware that his death may be imminent, contemplates the legacy he will leave, his city, his family, and the honor of his name. Achilles, driven by grief and unrelenting rage for Patroclus, presses relentlessly. Their encounter is not just physical but moral and emotional, embodying the epic's central concerns. the tension between pride, duty, and mortality. Hector falls. Homer depicts his death with a tragic poignancy, noting the nobility and bravery that defined him even in his final moments. Achilles' wrath is temporarily sated, yet the epic reminds the audience that the consequences of rage and violence are enduring. The treatment of Hector's body becomes central. Dishonoring it would violate sacred codes, while proper rites preserve memory and dignity. Book 23 shifts focus to the Greeks' mourning and commemoration of Patroclus. Funerary rites are performed with solemnity, highlighting the cultural and religious significance of honoring the dead. Homer dwells on games and rituals, which serve as both tribute and social cohesion. Even in grief, the Greeks seek to reaffirm their values of courage, honor, and communal solidarity. These passages illuminate Greek beliefs about mortality, remembrance, and the social structures that sustain heroic society. Finally, Book 24 brings the epic to a somber resolution. Priam, king of Troy, guided by the gods, approaches Achilles with humility and grief, seeking the return of Hector's body. The meeting is tender and profound. The human capacity for empathy, sorrow, and recognition of shared suffering transcends the enmity of war. Achilles, moved by Priam's plea and reminded of his own father, relents. The corpse of Hector is returned to Troy, and the city observes rites of mourning. Homer closes the epic not with the fall of Troy, but with this poignant acknowledgement of human vulnerability, dignity, and the enduring weight of honor. Through these final books, Homer weaves together the epic's central themes: the destructive power of wrath, the honor code that governs human and heroic action, the intervention of the divine, and the profound humanity beneath the violence. The Iliad ends not with victory or conquest, but with grief, reflection, and the solemn recognition of mortality, a powerful testament to the enduring human and cultural truths embedded in the epic.